America is an amazing country filled with wonderful people who do incredible things. But too often, the media and liberal politicians ignore big parts of our nation and the people who make it work. So I'm speaking with leaders and policymakers who deal with real problems every day. I'm Ronna McDaniel, and this is Real America. Today, I'm speaking with Vice President Mike Pence. So, Vice President Mike Pence, it is such a privilege and honor. I'm a little intimidated to have you on Real America, but it's great to see you. Thank you for joining my podcast. How are you doing?
Great to see you, Ronna, and great to be on Real America. We're doing great. Our family's blessed. We moved home to Indiana last summer, and all of our kids are thriving. And
you're a new grandpa?
I became a grandfather.
Are you and Karen all about spoiling?
We've gone down and we've looked after her and given the kids some time since
wonderful.
Michael came back from deployment. And our other daughter is writing for the Daily Wire. Her husband is a Navy pilot stationed in California, and our youngest is a Yale law grad who recently moved to Chicago. She and her husband are working there, and they're just—
You have to be so proud.
Yeah, we're very proud. We're very
That's
blessed.
amazing. And I got to know your family, and you're so gracious. And I hope people know whenever you had people over and you and Karen, you really felt like you were visiting someone's home, even though you were the Vice President of the United States.
Oh,
That's
thank
just
you.
a true talent and gift that you have to be
Well,
so
that was
kind.
all Karen. You know, we just considered it such a privilege to serve.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of the record of the Trump-Pence administration.
Absolutely.
I'm so proud of what our party was able to deliver for America, particularly in those first 2 years when we had Republican majorities in the House and the Senate, and a Republican president who was determined every day to deliver on the promises that he made to the American people. I mean, the strengthening our military, the growth in our economy, energy independence, conservatives on our courts, including 3 Supreme Court justices.
The record is so long.
It is, and everywhere I go across the country, people will stop me in airports, stop me on the street, and they'll just say, you know,
we miss you.
can we get it turned around?
We miss you.
Say, we miss you guys. And I tell them, we're going to get it all back.
I think in some ways the record of Biden and his numbers are so bad because of what he followed, because we know how good it could be. So I do want to talk about, obviously, something that's happening in our world right now, and you've had sons that served in the armed forces. What are your thoughts about the situation in Ukraine? And I remember you gave an interview, I think it was on Sean Hannity, where you said, weakness arouses evil. Can you talk about that a little bit in the situation we are right now on the world stage?
From the first day of our administration, we rebuilt our military. Largest increases in our national defense since the days of Ronald Reagan. We also stood strong. We opposed the Iran nuclear deal. We got out of the Nord Stream 2 gas deal where Russian gas would be sold in to an ever-dependent Europe. We were willing to use force when necessary to prosecute our interests. We fired missiles after chemical attacks into Syria. We took down Qasem Soleimani. We took down ISIS and Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. I mean, under President Donald Trump, the world knew that America was strong and that America was willing to use that strength to defend our interests and our allies. But things have changed.
Yeah.
And the reality is, from the first days of this administration, where you literally saw reopening the Iran nuclear deal, you saw an administration that stood silent while rockets showered down on our most cherished ally, Israel. You saw an administration that shut down the Keystone Pipeline in our country and then approved the Nord Stream 2 pipeline for the Russians to Europe. And, of course, the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, I believe, all sent a message of weakness to the world. And weakness arouses evil. And I
think that's such a strong statement because it's true.
Look, there's one person that needs to be held accountable for what's happening in Ukraine, and that's Putin. Putin must stop or Putin must pay. But there's no question that the Biden administration, through its weak and feckless foreign policy, and to no less extent by shutting down American energy and the American energy independence that we secured removed the deterrence that we had put into effect. I mean, when you think about it, the Trump-Pence administration was the only administration in the 21st century where Putin and Russia did not even try to change international boundary lines by force. I mean, it happened under George W. Bush in Georgia.
And then
it
Crimea.
Happened under Obama-Biden in Crimea. But for 4 years, I truly believe that our adversaries around the world knew that America was strong. And Putin only understands strength.
Well, Obama drew the red line in Syria. Right. And then when Assad crossed it, he did nothing. But when it happened under your watch, we did something, and it sent a message to the world. Biden comes in, he leaves Afghanistan, he leaves American citizens behind, he abandons Bagram Air Force Base, he doesn't have a plan, we lose the lives of wonderful servicemen and women. You know that Putin was watching that. Of course, you know better than anybody. That was an opening, don't you think, for him to say, okay, this is the time I can make this move in Ukraine?
Vladimir Putin is a dictator.
Mm-hmm.
And
he speaks one language.
He speaks the language of force. And I truly believe that we had put into place the kind of credibility and the kind of American strength that deterred his otherwise normal ambitions. And sadly, that's been eroded. But now, it's absolutely essential that this administration take the steps necessary. First, we need to continue to arm the Ukrainian people to make sure that they can defend themselves by themselves. We need to make sure humanitarian aid is flowing into the region and even into Ukraine as we speak. We need to sanction all the financial institutions in Russia. Our economy is 15 times larger than Russia's economy. I mean, we need to cut them out of the world financial system that uses the American dollar. And Rana, the time has come for us to sanction and embargo the export of Russian oil to the world.
Why won't Biden do that? Why won't he do it?
I can't imagine. I mean, it was a week ago we actually saw what I think was a line that will live in infamy from the podium in the press room at the White House, where you literally had a spokesman for the Biden administration making it clear that the sanctions they were announcing did not affect the energy exports from Russia. Russia's tanks are rolling into Crimea, or rolling into Ukraine. People are dying and in the streets in Ukraine, and they're stepping cautiously so that they don't step on what is the lifeblood of the Russian economy,
which is Russian oil and gas.
Russian oil and gas, and for us to hesitate in this moment, I think would be a tragedy. And in addition to that, though, we ought to be doing that which is completely in our control. The Biden administration ought to stop the budget cuts of our military, go back to building our military, and we need to unleash American energy, approve the Keystone Pipeline, and have this administration remove the moratorium on public lands and all the leases that are waiting to be approved.
Which is the second thing I was going to ask you about. Obviously, on the world stage, we're very concerned about what's happening. And you look at countries like Germany that is stepping up. They are increasing their military. They're finally going to meet their NATO obligation.
Finally are.
Finally.
I mean, President Trump called on them over and over to meet their obligations of our common defense, and now they're finally doing it.
But the oil and gas and what Biden has done with stopping the drilling on federal lands, also shutting down Keystone Pipeline, which he did within the first week of his presidency, the first month, it doesn't have just international implications. It's affecting us domestically here at home. And under your administration, the Trump-Pence administration, we were energy independent. It was a priority. Explain why that creates strength for our country, but also lowers gas prices, allows us to not be dependent on OPEC in the Middle East, and how that's added to inflation, which is at a 40-year high right now in our country.
You know, one of the advantages of no longer being vice president is I get to drive my own car.
Yeah.
One of the disadvantages is I get to pay for my own gas.
Exactly. And it's $1 more than it was a year ago.
And it's really impacting American families.
Mm-hmm.
And look, people thought energy independence was beyond the scope of anything that we could do in this country. And yet, think about that. In 3 short years, we became a net exporter of energy for the first time in 70 years in this country. And it's because we allowed for the development of oil, natural gas, exploration, exports, and we developed all the resources of our land. It's extraordinary. You know, I've always said, Rana, that I think the pillars of American greatness are our faith in God, our freedom, and our vast natural resources.
Exactly.
And our administration sought to strengthen all of those foundations, and America prospered as a result. I mean, low-cost energy drives jobs. It helps the budgets of families. And yet we have in Washington, D.C. today a Democratic Party that is literally being driven by the radical left.
Exactly.
That Joe Biden has decided to put the climate change agenda of the radical left and Bernie Sanders ahead of the pocketbooks of American families and American businesses. And I think it's one of the reasons why we're on the cusp of an extraordinary opportunity to change the direction of this country with Election Day 2022.
It's remarkable to me that what's happening on the international front, knowing that we're bringing in Russian oil, but also on the domestic front, knowing that families are paying on average about $350 more a month because of inflation, which directly has to do with gas, right? When you're transporting goods, you're using gas, means it's costing more. If gas costs more, everything costs more. And they still won't open up our energy independence. And they're putting that hardship on the American family who came out of a pandemic, who wants the government to be fighting for them. And at this time in this place, they're saying, no, we're more in tune with the progressive agenda than we are with the American people. And we saw that through COVID, right?
Right.
With our kids being kept out of school, we were more in tune with the unions than we were with the American family.
Well, you literally saw that in the president's State of the Union address. And, you know, I've sat through more than a few of those.
Just a few.
And I had a good chair for a few of them.
Mm-hmm. A pretty good one.
Speeches that
unfortunately, I had to sit next to Nancy Pelosi for a couple, but.
I got to tell you, though, there were 2 things about President Biden's State of the Union that were striking to me. Number one was to hear the president literally say, we're going to secure our border, we're going to open our schools, and we're going to fund the police. And I mean, literally, I thought one of the pages that Nancy Pelosi ripped in half must have landed back on the podium.
I know, right?
Now, he just paid lip service.
It was rhetoric, empty rhetoric.
He paid lip service to the agenda because in the very same breath, then he turned and tried to resurrect the Build Back Broke bill that's already been rejected by the Congress out of hand. I mean, to think that at a time when inflation's at a 40-year high, that this is a president that thinks raising taxes on the American people is a good idea is astonishing to me. More government spending is inherently inflationary, and yet he continues to drive this left-wing agenda, massive more spending and debt. And then while he pays lip service to securing the border, literally in the same sentence, he advocated a broader range of amnesty that I had ever heard a president described from the podium. After 2 million people crossed our border illegally, a record in a single year, which breaks my heart because people are suffering on both sides of the border.
They are. And
being exploited south of the border. And yet in our administration, we had reduced illegal immigration by 90%. And literally secured our border and ended the crisis. Now we have the worst border crisis in history. But it's all being driven, like you said, Rana, because, look, I like to put it this way. Joe Biden won his party's nomination, but Bernie Sanders won the party.
Exactly. That's so true.
The radical left is in the saddle.
They are.
In the Democratic Party in Washington, D.C., and I think the American people know it. And it's one of the reasons why you see people rallying to our cause,
party.
rallying to our party.
Well, because they
It
know
sets the
these are
stage for a
problems
great
that can
American
be
comeback.
fixed because you fixed. They know these are problems that can be fixed because you fixed them.
Right.
It did happen under your administration. They know we can be energy independent because they saw
Yes,
it
we
get
were.
done. They know we can be tough on the world stage because it was done. They know we can shut down our border with Remain in Mexico and other things because we did it. I want to talk about two more things in the past, and then I want to start talking about the future and what you've been up to. One is COVID. And I have to thank you for what you did with Operation Warp Speed and the blessing, just the amazing task force put together to get us a vaccine that put us in a position now where finally our kids are taking their masks off, they're back in school. But you led that. What was that like?
Well, I'll always be proud of what the American people accomplished in that first year of the COVID pandemic. I mean, when you think about it, when President Trump asked me to lead the task force, we had to reinvent testing from a standing start. We had to find and manufacture billions of supplies and medical equipment and deliver it to the American people. We had to develop therapeutics and develop a vaccine as quickly as possible. But because of, frankly, the leadership President Trump provided, the full cooperation, not just a whole of government, but a whole of America approach, the incredible sacrifice made by first responders, doctors, and nurses, and American businesses who stepped up time after time after time again to put the safety and health of their workers first and to bring real results. I mean, it's amazing to think the three major car companies in this country turned on a dime and started manufacturing ventilators.
Yep. I was there in one of the plants watching them do the ventilators.
Repurposed factory lines. And as we stand here today, well, I grieve the loss of every American life, and their families will always be in my heart. The fact that no American was ever denied an ICU bed in that first year of COVID, no American was ever denied a ventilator or the health care that they needed, I think is a tribute to the American people and something for which years from now we will look back and be proud. But what we also did is we did it all respecting freedom. We opened up America again. We never advocated that schools be closed. And the problem was you had Democrat governors around the country that took what were temporary measures at the beginning of a pandemic that we didn't fully understand at the time, and they made those policy. And the closing of schools and the closing of businesses and the mandates, the restrictions, and ultimately the attempt to mandate vaccines by the Biden administration that happily was turned aside by the conservative
RNC
majority.
Sued on that. We sued that too with OSHA.
And thank you for that. Yeah. But, you know, I always believed, and I know the president believed, that we could rise to this occasion, we could meet this moment, but we could meet it as a free people, and we did. And it's been so different under the Biden administration. It grieves my heart to see how they mishandled testing, how they mishandled supplies and therapeutics over the course of this year. But by God's grace, it looks like we're finally coming out. And
but what you did to buy a vaccine usually takes what, 5-10 years?
5 to 7 years.
5 to 7 years. The monoclonal antibodies, the PPE. I mean, it was all cylinders firing through the private, the public sector, breaking down barriers to get what needed done. And it put us in a position where we are now coming out of that because of your work, because of President Trump's work. Biden takes credit for it. He's never said thank you. But I think the American people understand that. But you balanced science with agency and freedom.
Yes.
And I think that was the key blend, the key recipe that the American people needed, because Republican governors that modeled that, those are the states that are recovering at a rapid clip. Those are the kids that are doing better in school, because that was the right way to govern, and you led the way.
I think it's been a time when the American people were able to see a contrast.
Exactly.
And especially at the state level. You know, I worked with every governor in the country. I talked to all 50 governors every week. when I was leading the task force for 50 weeks.
And all the governors, Republican and Democrat,
All of
every
them.
single one.
And we no politics. We provided the states what they needed when they needed it to save lives. And I'll always be proud of the way our nation stepped up. But in the aftermath of those early difficult days, people saw a real contrast of Republican leadership
They really did.
in state levels. And I really do believe that while so much is focused on Capitol Hill and the races for the House and the Senate, I'm actually very excited about governors' races around the country this year because I think the American people saw a clear contrast between governors who were willing to trust them with the decisions about their families and their communities and their businesses and their schools, and the heavy-handed approach of many
people
liberals.
against each other, and you are good if you believe this. It was so divisive the way the Democrats handled it. I'm from Michigan. We had a governor who did the same thing. My son didn't go to school for over a year and a half, 5-day week in person, just took the mask off. He's like, Mom, it's just amazing to be able to see the teacher's lips. They're learning again, but it all started with you, so thank you. One final thing I want to talk about that you did in the last administration, and I think we forget, one of the most important accomplishments of the Trump-Pence administration was the 3 Supreme Court justices, the 3 that were confirmed. And we're about to have another Supreme Court.
Nearly 300 federal judges confirmed.
And 300 federal judges.
Which was a record, including 3 justices.
But we have KBJ coming through the Biden administration. Right. Those hearings are going to happen. But you were instrumental. I think you were the last interview for Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. Tell me about that process. What types of questions did you ask them?
Well, it was extraordinary because you remember when President Trump asked me to lead the transition.
Yes.
After we won the election in 2016, we were also making a decision to fill a vacancy in the Supreme Court of the United States following the death of Justice Antonin Scalia. And we had 9 finalists, and then the president-elect told me he'd like me to interview the finalists, and I had the great privilege to do that. Did it again on the next round. And so I got to know not only the people that President Trump ultimately chose, but I got to know what an extraordinary group of men and women we have at the highest caliber on federal benches around the country. But it was such a privilege for me. But I did always ask at the end of every interview, I'd say, if the president didn't choose you,
okay,
who from the list that's being considered would you suggest he does pick? And I got some very interesting answers.
Did they answer?
Very interesting ansers. I'm writing a book that'll be out later this year.
I'm excited about that. Do you put that in the book?
I'll give you the answers in the book. But it was very insightful, and all the answers reflected so well on all of the candidates. The courts, quite frankly, with activist judges, have played an outsized role in the life of our nation. I continue to hope and gathered not long ago with some friends on a conference call to pray nationwide about the Dobbs decision that's coming before the Supreme Court. I think, Ronna, we have an opportunity for a new beginning on the sanctity of life in this country, to return to the states and to the people the decision of such magnitude. But to see the men and women that have come on the court and to see the opportunity to see principled conservatives making the decisions, trusting the American people. I hope and pray on that issue and on so many other issues, but steering us to the proper role of the court, not to make laws, but to resolve disputes.
But to be instrumental in putting 3 justices on who follow the Constitution and don't write the law from the bench and interpret the law as they're supposed to.
Right.
That's what our founders intended, and you helped preserve that as Democrats are trying to tear that down. Obviously, they've talked about stacking the Supreme Court. So thank you for that. Now, I want to talk about what you've been doing. I know you've bought a home in Indiana. We have a new grandbaby. You mentioned a book. When is your book coming out?
It'll be out before the end of the year.
Does it have a title, or are we not allowed to know that yet?
It's an autobiography.
Okay. I'm very excited about that.
Well, thank you. I'm very humbled by it. It's
Have you enjoyed that process, writing a book?
it's been
That sounds
very
like
meaningful.
a no. No, just kidding. No, you enjoyed it. You've enjoyed it.
It's been very meaningful for me. After things settled out in the election after January 20th, Karen and I looked at each other and said, well, we don't know what the future holds. We know who holds the future. But we were sure that whatever the Lord has for us, we'd see it better from Indiana. And so we moved home. I've been traveling a lot around the country. In addition to writing the book, I've been traveling with Young America's Foundation and speaking on college campuses.
That's what I was going to talk about that too.
And Heritage Foundation, and I've worked with them, and we even created an organization of our own that's brought together some 50 conservative leaders that are helping to put together a positive conservative agenda for the future.
You started your own PAC, and you've started your own think tank, and it's called Advancing America.
Advancing American Freedom. We established it really as a place where former cabinet members, people that I had come to know over the last 30 years that I've been involved in the conservative movement, could come together, maybe the best and brightest, with the idea of, look, I think Ronald Reagan taught our party a lot when he brought his agenda of a strong national defense and less government, less taxes, traditional values. I saw in both of the Bush administrations an articulation of that and a building on that foundation. But then I really do believe President Trump brought more ideas to the agenda as well, whether it be a commitment to secure borders, whether it be a commitment to putting American jobs and American workers first when it comes to trade, and obviously a commitment to stand up to China and recognize the threat economically and strategically that China represents. But all of those ideas, what we're trying to do is say 74 million people said yes to that agenda in 2020. And to go to maybe have one place where we can be reminded of what the American people embraced and what I'm confident they'll embrace again in 22 and beyond.
I believe they will too, and I know, you're going to be out there a lot for these midterms, and
excited about it.
It's all hands on deck. It's everybody in our party, anybody who cares about the future of our country and is watching what's happening. We've got to come together and win this election. So, what are you going to do in the midterms? What's your plan? I know you're going to be out there campaigning and working hard.
Well, Ronna, I just think it's important that people understand. I was there the last time we defeated Nancy Pelosi. I was the conference chairman in the House of Representatives when Nancy Pelosi was last speaker. And I just knew if we provided the loyal opposition, if we put forward a positive conservative vision for the American people, we could defeat Nancy Pelosi. And we beat the Democrat majority in 2010. We won the Senate 2 years later. And of course, we won the White House in 2016. I think we can do it all again. But I have to tell you, when I travel around the country, I feel like the enthusiasm for what we are all about as Republicans has never been greater. And I think that is largely owing to the administration that you helped elect. I mean, for years, Republicans like you and I would talk about, well, we believe our ideas work if we put them into practice. Implement them. What we were able under the Trump-Pence administration to do was literally put into practice these policies on taxes and regulation and conservatives on our courts and military reform and America standing unapologetically in the world, moving the American embassy to Jerusalem, achieving the Abraham Accords, incredible progress for peace. I mean, now it isn't just what we say we could do. Now we can say it's what we've done. Contrast that with the failed record of this administration at home and abroad, the radical left agenda that's trying to drive America toward a European-style social welfare state. And I really do believe, like you said, it's all hands on deck. And I'm going to be out there helping candidates for the House and Senate and our governors around the country to win back America. And if you had it, we have a whole new class of candidates. We have more women running than ever, more veterans, more. It is an amazing group of candidates. I've gotten to meet some of them. If you could give a piece of advice to a candidate running, you did this, you've run for Congress, you've run for office, what would you say to them as they're heading into this election cycle? Be a happy warrior. Okay. Have faith in the American people. I mean, look, I know the disappointment of the 2020 election. you'll remember I was on the ballot.
I do.
And to have lost the Senate in the wake of that as well was heartbreaking. But I have to tell you, from all of my travels across this country as vice president, my opinion of the American people went up over those 4 years. And it continues to, I continue to be inspired by the generosity and the innovation and the faith of the people of this country. I mean, we just got to give we got to give this country government as good as our people. And I would say to any candidate, just go out, let your yes be yes and no be no, articulate a positive conservative vision, hold the banner of freedom high, and the American people will rally to your cause.
And be a happy warrior. I love that because people do gravitate towards positivity. You're such a positive person, and I know faith's such a big part of your life and your family. I want to end on a little bit of a lighter note, but first let me just say thank you. I have just enjoyed getting to know you over the past 4 years as RNC chair and working so closely together. And I just thank you for all you've done for our country and all you're going to do to help us win back in these midterms. And thank you to Karen and the whole family. You're such an amazing man.
It's been a privilege.
And you're as nice in person as you are on TV. It's all real. It's not for show. It's real. It's genuine. I'll just end with a question, a request for me.
Yeah.
You had a very, very successful radio show for years and years and years before you ran for Congress. This is my first foray into this.
It wasn't as big as Real America.
No, it was a lot bigger than Real America. So any pointers you can give to a newbie in this field, I should have asked before I started the interview instead of the end, but any advice you can give me as I'm venturing into this podcast world?
Well, no, Ronna, let me begin first by just saying thank you for stepping up to lead our party at such a time as this. You have demonstrated a strength and a grace that has drawn people to our party, has set records in fundraising that people never thought were possible, and it's laid a foundation for a victory, not just for our party, but it's going to be a victory for America in 2022 and beyond. So I'm very grateful to you. But I don't think you need any pointers. Back when I did radio in the 1990s, people would sometimes come up to me and say, I listen to you every day and I feel like I know you. And I said, well, you do know me. That's me on the radio.
Yeah.
That is who I am.
And were you on every day?
And I would, every day, I was on 3 hours a day, 6 days a week. It was kind of like Rush Limbaugh on decaf.
On decaf.
On just in the state of Indiana.
And did you love it? Did you just love it?
I did love it, but you've already met the mark. I mean, I'm a fan of Real America.
Thank you.
I can tell all of your viewers out there that the winsome, sincere, strong, principled host of the show is what you see is what you get. You're coming across just as you are, and that's the only mark you need to hit to be a success and to continue to succeed.
Thank you.
On Real America and continue to lead the Republican Party with great distinction.
Well, I look forward to working with you to November as we turn this country around, the country we love so much. And I know you love this country more than anything, and you've got 2 sons serving this country, and you've given so much. But this is our time and our place to really take it back and return it to what our founders intended. So thank you. I look forward to being with you on the campaign trail, and thank you for joining me on my podcast.
Oh, it's just a thrill for me. And once again, just thanks for all you do for the cause and the country. And let's go win back the Congress and these governorships in 22, and then let's win back America.
Let's start with
24.
Michigan. Let's beat Whitcroft and Whitmer, okay? Thank you, Vice President Pence.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you. I'm Ronna McDaniel, and this is what Republicans stand for. Join us next time on Real America.